Hello and welcome to Didn't Read It, the podcast with a festive Oedipal complex.
Books, 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 books.
I am your host, Grace Todd, and I am joined today by a new friend, Hannah Land.
Hello.
Hi, Hannah.
Hi.
Welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Would you like to introduce yourself and tell people where to find you?
Sure. My name is Hannah. I am an aspiring comedian. I just moved to New York from Richmond, Virginia. So if anyone knows how to get me famous in New York, please let me know. You can get in touch with me on Instagram at @officialhannahland.
Congratulations on the move. How's it going?
It's going pretty well. It's definitely a culture shock. There's constantly people around. They don't really go to sleep like they do in Virginia, it seems. But I'm really enjoying it so far.
Good.
Yeah.
Question. Are you encountering a lot of elevators?
Not enough.
Okay.
Not enough.
Are any of the elevators you are encountering haunted?
Probably. I'd say most of the elevators I'm encountering are in the subway where I'm sure someone is haunting.
I feel like we underestimate the elevator as a place ripe to be haunted.
Oh, yeah. I read something sometime that was I think only hotels skip the 13th floor on the elevator.
Yeah.
I don't know how true that is, but they don't do it at my office building. So far so good, but fingers crossed.
Uh-oh.
Yeah.
What happens on the 13th floor of your office building?
I think it's a law firm. I'm on the 10th floor, so luckily I haven't had to go that high, but something unlucky, surely.
Well, I was going to say, if it's lawyers, then they're exempt from anything bad happening to them because they are the bad thing happening.
Oh, so true. Yeah, that's probably the secret.
You can only put law firms on the 13th floors of office buildings.
Yes.
And that's how you keep it safe.
Of course. You either need to not include the 13th floor or only lawyers.
All right. Well, I have brought you a story that involves a haunted elevator.
Nice.
Today. We're going to get a little festive. It is now December, which is very exciting for some of us and very complicated for some of us. And in true Didn't Read It fashion, instead of doing a short story that's like, and then we all sat around the fire and we were so thankful for each other, we're doing the opposite of that. We are leaning into the Victorian tradition of horror and ghost stories around this time of year. Maybe because the UK is not as into Halloween as we are.
That would make sense. Yeah.
Yeah. So for them, December, the winter solstice, that is time for spookiness.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that makes more sense than kind of our American Hallmark film obsession.
I would agree.
You know, it's a fraught time. It's a dark time, like literally.
Dark at 4:30. Yeah. It's a haunted time for sure.
I was setting up to do this recording, and I closed my curtains to minimize the sound from outside. And I had this thought as soon as I sat down, oh, when I open these curtains again, it's going to be dark, dark.
Kiss it goodbye. Yeah.
All of that being said, I've brought you a short story by L.P. Hartley called Someone in the Lift.
Oh, sounds ominous.
It is. It's very ominous. It was published in 1955. So just imagine that the mom in this story is zoomed out on barbiturates, and the dad is either like a broken shell of a man because he served in the war, or he's a fragile, tetchy shell of his former self because he feels super weird about not serving in the war.
Both complicated.
Yeah.
Complicated men.
So just everyone is having a great time and everything is super normal.
Perfect.
There's someone coming down in the lift, Mummy. No, my darling, you're wrong. There isn't. But I can see him through the bars, a tall gentleman. You think you can, but it's only a shadow. Now you'll see the lift's empty. And it always was. This piece of dialogue, or variations of it, had been repeated at intervals ever since Mr. and Mrs. Maldon and their son Peter had arrived at the Brompton Court Hotel, where, owing to a domestic crisis, they were going to spend Christmas.
Domestic crisis.
That
What could that mean?
That line is doing a lot of heavy lifting, and we are going to revisit it.
Good.
Because, like, what do you mean a domestic crisis?
In which way? Mommy needs a lobotomy?
What happened to your house?
Right. Okay, all right, I'm along for it.
New to hotel life, the little boy had never seen a lift before, and he was fascinated by it. When either of his parents pressed the button to summon it, he would take up his stand some distance away to watch it coming down. And so Peter, who is pretty small, is immediately enchanted by this elevator. And the thing about it that is sort of important for the story is that it's an old-fashioned elevator, I think maybe even by 1950s standards.
Oh, wow.
It's one of the ones that's kind of like a cage,
Mm-hmm.
and it has the metal gates that open and shut, and you can see it coming from up and down the elevator shaft from the lobby.
Oh, so is it like an open shaft-ish?
Yes.
That sounds yucky.
I know. Have you ever seen like the Art Deco
Yeah.
elevators? Yeah, and so it's that like metal, that kind of gilded metal cage
Mhm.
all the way through the core of the building. And then the elevator itself is also a cage, and so you can see all the way into it from a distance.
Yes.
Peter is enchanted by this.
Of course.
And it notes that he's been told he's not allowed to use the lift, which is an unnecessary warning because it says he connected the lift with things that grown-up people did. And unlike most small boys, he wasn't over-anxious to share the privileges of his elders. He was content to wonder and admire. The lift appealed to him more as magic than as mechanism. So he's a little boy who is not overly concerned with sort of enmeshing himself in the grown-up world.
I can't relate. That's so interesting. My wife is like that, where she's content to just wonder about things and never try them out, just kind of see, just take it all in. Good for Peter.
I was also not that child. I was like, I am ready to be a grown-up. Make me a grown-up right now. I
Mhm.
want to play with the buttons on the elevator.
I'm ready for a job.
Yes, exactly. Send me to war. I'm for.
Please.
I'm ready. But Peter, not like us. He's not like us. They're not like us. And it says that he accepts the sort of magic of the elevator in the same way that he kind of accepts this thing that he's seeing in the elevator.
Mm.
And accepts it even though, as his mother points out to him over and over again, every time the elevator gets to the bottom and the gate opens, it's gone. And his mom appears to be a little concerned about his preoccupation with this figure, this thing, and tells him that if he doesn't believe her, that that he must be imagining it, he should talk to his father.
Oh, classic. If we're not believing women now, I don't know why I'm surprised we weren't believing them then.
Peter, the 6-year-old misogynist, like, come on, buddy.
Yeah. Yes, all men, including Peter, the 4-year-old.
And Peter pushes back by saying that his father would call him silly. And his mother responds with, Daddy never says you're silly. And this is not quite true.
Mm-hmm.
It says, like all well-regulated modern fathers, Mr. Maldon was aware of the danger of offending a son of tender years. The psychological results might be regrettable. But Freud or no Freud, fathers are still fathers. And sometimes, when Peter irritated him, Mr. Maldon would let fly. Although he was fond of him, Peter's private vision of his father was of someone more authoritative and awe-inspiring than a stranger, seeing them together, would have guessed.
Interesting.
Yeah, so our relationship with Daddy is not uncomplicated.
Already complex. He's got a lot going for him.
And I'm very interested in the note that like all well-regulated modern fathers.
Right.
And you can hear Mrs. Malden in that line, right? You can hear his wife being like, you can't talk to him in these specific ways because we understand psychology now.
Right.
It's the 50s.
We're modern women. We're modern men and girls. I don't know. Yeah, that's wild to me. I don't know. I wouldn't expect anyone in the 1950s to have any concern over how they talk to a child. So that's a progressive point for him.
Well, put a pin in that concern, because we're going to complicate that a little later.
Okay.
But the other reason that Peter doesn't want to talk to his father about the figure in the lift is that it turns out Peter only sees the figure in the lift when he's with his mother and not when his father is there.
Likely story.
What are our thoughts here?
Oh, I think the thing in the elevator surely is his father in some demonic phase, probably, maybe. Haven't read it. Didn't read it, famously.
You said the thing!
Those are my context clues so far.
And so Peter, in the sort of face of all of this, it says that he begins to evolve a theory. And this is one of those things that feels very well drawn because it feels very accurate to the way that children sort of make connections in this kind of hazy way. It says, if the figure only appeared in his father's absence, didn't it follow that the figure might be, could be, must be his own father?
Oh, well, there you go.
In what region of his consciousness Peter believed this, it would be hard to say. But for imaginative purposes, he did believe it, and the figure became for him Daddy in the lift. The thought of Daddy in the lift did frighten him, and the neighborhood of the lift shaft, in which he felt compelled to hang about, became a place of dread.
Ooh, this is juicy.
Yeah, and again, in terms of like really capturing what it's like being a small child, the note that he is frightened of this but can't stay away from it.
Right. He hasn't yet touched the hot stove, but he's about to.
But he's really staring at it.
Yeah.
But it is the festive season. Christmas Day is coming near, and they start decorating the hotel for all of this. You know, they're putting up evergreens and mistletoe and making the hotel lobby festive. And at the same time, Mrs. Malden is becoming increasingly concerned about Peter's fantasy, shall we say, whatever it is that he's got going on with this elevator, that she finally insists that Mr. Malden have a talk with him. In that,
take care of business, Daddy-o.
Yes, in that very 1950s, like, well, you talk to him, honey. Man to man.
Yeah.
With a 6-year-old.
Just some guy time together.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so he and his father are waiting for the elevator together. And his father says, your mother tells me you've seen someone in the lift who isn't there. It notes that he, as this whole conversation is happening, consistently is coming across as more confrontational and more harsh than he means to.
No way, a dad not communicating the way he intends? That doesn't sound right.
That's crazy. That never happens.
Not then, not now, not never.
And so Peter starts out evasive, and his dad is like, well, your mom told me that you saw this consistently. And inspired by the decor, he follows up with, do you know who I think it might be? And it says that Peter is caught by a gust of terror.
Oh, God.
And cries, oh, please don't tell me. But his father, it says very reasonably, says, why, you silly boy? Don't you want to know? Which is, again, exactly what he told his father would say, right? He calls him silly and does that thing where he's being very reasonable, and Peter is too young to be able to kind of, do you know that sensation when you're a kid where an adult kind of backs you into a rhetorical corner and you know that they're still wrong, but you lack the sort of rhetorical skills?
Yes. That totally makes sense. Poor Peter.
Yeah, and it notes that this makes him ashamed of his cowardice, and so he accepts his whatever explanation his father is about to provide.
Mm-hmm.
And his dad says, "Why, it's Father Christmas, of course."
Ho, ho, ho.
Ho, 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 indeed. And Peter points out that Father Christmas is supposed to come down the chimney.
Right. Peter's too smart for this immediately.
He's cottoning on to a problem here. And his father comes back and says that was in the old days, but now in the beautiful modern era of 1955, Father Christmas comes down in an elevator.
Mm.
Peter contemplates this and then asks his father if he's going to dress up as Father Christmas this year.
Oh.
Yes.
Okay. Interesting.
Yeah. And his father says he might. And Peter's like, well, if you do that, are you going to come down in the lift?
Mm.
And his father says, well, yes, that's what it's for. And then we get this sort of conclusion from Peter's perspective. It says, after this, Peter felt happier about the shadowy passenger behind the bars. Father Christmas couldn't hurt anyone, even if he was, as Peter now believed him to be, his own father.
I see.
Mm-hmm.
I think Peter's clearly needing to be in therapy. He's got some very complex relationships with male figures in his life.
We're going to get some more interesting male figures here in a second. But it says, Peter was only 6, but he could remember 2 Christmas Eves when his father had dressed up as Santa Claus and given him a delicious thrill. He could hardly wait for this one, when the apparition in the corner would at last become a reality.
Right.
No foreshadowing there.
No.
But, unfortunately, real bummer for Peter, 2 days before Christmas, the lift breaks down.
Oh.
Yeah.
Not so modern, is it?
Yeah. Not so modern now, are you?
Got him.
And the hotel fills up with workmen who are attempting to salvage this lift. Peter loves the workmen.
Oh.
Peter's really thrilled with the workmen. It says that he doesn't really mind taking the stairs because when he takes the stairs, he gets to stop at every floor and chat with the workmen.
Mm-hmm.
They keep promising him that the lift will be fixed by Christmas Eve. And
it better be. That's Father Christmas's big day.
This is very important. Yeah. How else is Father Christmas going to get here if he's not going to come down in the elevator and also be my father?
Right. That's a big day for him. It's going to need to be fixed.
And it says, Peter didn't doubt this. To him, the workmen were infallible, possessed of magic powers capable of suspending the ordinary laws that governed lifts. Look how they left the gates open and shouted to each other up and down the awesome lift shaft, paying as little attention to the other hotel visitors as if they didn't exist. Only to Peter did they vouchsafe a word.
Interesting. I think Peter might be a little haunted.
Well, and it's, again, in terms of all of these kind of very endearing little notes, small children and repair people.
Mm-hmm.
It's a whole thing.
Yeah.
And you can very much imagine him being kind of obsessed with these workmen and the workmen in turn being like, oh, like little kids spending Christmas in a hotel.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to fix it for you. But alas, Christmas Eve comes, the morning passes, the afternoon passes, the evening passes. The workmen are still working.
Oh, gosh.
They have not fixed the lift. And Peter dozes off. He's been told he can stay up for dinner, which that's one of those little things that is kind of an archaic, he's 6.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it used to be a lot more common then. The whole thing is that he always goes to bed before dinner, right? Because dinner's too late in the evening.
Sure.
So his parents must feed him very early. But this is Christmas Eve, and he has been told that he can stay up for proper fancy dinner down in the dining room. But he dozes off waiting for dinner to start, and he dozes off listening to the workmen out in the hallway. And he wakes up, and it's dark, and he's completely alone in their hotel room, in his hotel room. He has an adjoining room to his parents, and his clock has stopped. It's Christmas Eve. He realizes his family must be down at dinner, and he sneaks out into, not sneaks out, but he's kind of creeping through the hotel. It's dark. He's never been down this, like, up and down the stairs after dark alone before. And he goes into the dining room and he finds his mother. And it says that he's in a little bit of like a dream state. You know, that kind of like fuzzy, half awake. He's up much later than he's used to being. His mother comes towards him, threading her way between the tables as if they were just bits of furniture, not alien islands under hostile sway.
Right.
She says that, you know, we couldn't find you, but, you know, you've made it, which is an odd note.
Right. Oh, we're just waiting for Peter to arrive. He keeps his own schedule.
What do you mean you couldn't find him? It's a hotel.
Right.
Where did you think he was?
And he knows he's not allowed in the lift. Plus, it's broken.
And they sit down, and she tells him that Daddy will be coming soon. And it says, suddenly there was a crash. It seemed to come from within, from the kitchen, perhaps. Smiles lit up the faces of the diners. A man at a nearby table laughed and said, "Something's on the floor. Somebody'll be for it." Which, it's nice to know that the weird thing where people get the urge to applaud when waitstaff drop things it goes back all the way back to the 50s, apparently.
Oh, nice.
Just one of the worst human instincts on earth. Anyway.
Yeah.
And Peter asks what it is, and his mother says, "Oh, you know, someone must have dropped a tray." And then, to Peter, it seemed an anticlimax, this paltry accident that had stolen the thunder of his father's entry. For he didn't doubt that his father would come in as Father Christmas. The suspense was unbearable. "Can I go into the hall and wait for him?" His mother hesitated, and then said yes. And he goes into the lobby of the hotel, and it's completely empty. There's nobody there.
Totally regular.
Very dark. He stops to debate whether it's sort of cheating if he waits too close to the lift for his father to appear, in that way that small children often do, you know?
Oh, I remember that. Yeah. I wanted to stay up, but not too late. And I wanted to, like, hear Santa, but not see, because that would, yeah, you have to keep a respectful distance. And he knows that.
There's a lot of negotiating, right?
Yeah.
And it says, magic has its rules which mustn't be disobeyed. But he was there now, at his old place in front of the lift, and the lift would come down if he pressed the button. He knew he mustn't, that it was forbidden, that his father would be angry if he did. Yet he reached up and pressed it. But nothing happened. The lift didn't come, and why? Because some careless person had forgotten to shut the gates. Monkeying with the lift, his father called it. Perhaps the workmen had forgotten in their hurry to get home. There was only one thing to do, to find out which floor the gates had been left open, and then shut them.
Oh, gosh. You don't want to go to every floor.
So Peter runs up the stairs, and it turns out that the gates have been left open on their floor, in front of their room. So he
of course,
closes the gates, he runs back down to the lobby, and again, it points out one more time that he's in a little bit of this dreamy, dissociative, half awake, you know, he's a little bit carried away with the magic, a little bit just sleepy and still feeling like he's in a dream. And it says, triumph possessed him. Triumph lent him wings. He was back on the ground floor with his finger on the button. A thrill of power, such as he had never known, ran through him when the machinery answered to his touch.
Good for him.
Yeah.
Yeah, make it happen.
We're doing things.
Yeah.
But what was this? The lift was coming up from below, not down from above. And there was something wrong with its roof. A jagged hole that lit the light through. But the figure was there, in its accustomed corner, and this time it hadn't disappeared. It was still there. He could see it through the mazy crisscross of the bars, a figure in a red robe with white edges and wearing a red cowl on his head. His father, Father Christmas, Daddy in the lift. But why didn't he look at Peter? And why was his white beard streaked with red?
Oh, God.
The two grills folded back when Peter pushed them. Toys were lying at his father's feet, but he couldn't touch them, for they were too red, red and wet as the floor of the lift, red as the jag of lightning that tore through his brain. The end.
No. It's not really, is it?
Yeah,
What?
that's the end of the story.
No, it's not.
Yeah.
Are you serious?
Yes.
What am I supposed to do now? What do you mean? That's infuriating. So, all right. Is this part of a larger anthology, perhaps, like Peter Part 2? Or is this is all we're left with?
That is it. That is the whole story.
Wow.
Mhm.
And do you think it's a good story in that it ends that way?
I think that if I were writing it, I would be a little bit more, let's see. I feel like it is easy when you are writing fiction to try and be a little bit too clever,
Uh-huh.
you know? And
Yeah.
and maybe you're just like, he's dead,
Right.
right? You're just like, this is a corpse.
Sure.
I feel like the jag of lightning that tears through the brain is an interesting place to end.
Definitely.
But I also do genuinely think that this is a successful story.
Mm.
And I think it does what it intended to. Because would it surprise you if I told you that L.P. Hartley was a gay man?
Oh. Well, no. Tell me more.
So, obviously, and I know I wind up saying this all the time on this show, but there is a lot happening in this story.
Mm-hmm.
And if we go back to a couple of really key details, because this is a very short story.
Yeah.
Only a few pages long.
That's why I was sure you were kidding when you said that was it.
Nope. If we go back to, and again, I wish we had even one more detail on the domestic crisis, because
Right.
I want to speculate about that so hard. But the line about well-regulated modern fathers,
Mm-hmm.
which says specifically, Mr. Malden was aware of the danger of offending a son of tender years. The psychological results might be regrettable. But Freud or no Freud, fathers are still fathers. So Freud is in the he's right there.
Right. Freud's like into mom stuff, right?
So Freud's, and I actually went and double checked because I was like, I think I remember where Freud stood on homosexuality, but I cannot remember the details.
I sure don't know, so fill me in.
So Freud, and I want to be very clear to anyone out there who is actually a psychologist or has actually studied Freud at length, I am a fucking book nerd.
Mm-hmm.
This is not what my degree is in. But essentially, the like quick and dirty version, Freud believed that all humans are born essentially bisexual.
Oh, sure.
Right? I mean, I read that part and was like, yeah.
Well, yeah.
With you so far.
Totally.
He did not think that homosexuality was evil. He did think it was abnormal.
It's a little queer, if you will.
Indeed. And specifically, he seemed to think that people who were exclusively interested in the opposite sex were very abnormal, but that a certain amount of bisexuality that persists into adulthood is like kind of whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But the idea was that essentially we are all born bisexual, and then as we age, as we go through puberty, the emotional experience, like the experiences that we have, dictate where we will land sexually. And that if everything goes sort of correctly, we will come out heterosexual.
Mm-hmm.
But if things go wrong, we will come out homosexual. And one of those things is that he's got the whole idea of the Oedipus instinct, which is that little boys love their mothers and resent their fathers and must ultimately symbolically kill their fathers to replace them. And that's when they become men.
Whoa.
And one of the problems, one of the big concerns is that if like little boys overly identify with their mothers or are too alienated from their fathers, then they wind up being queers.
Totally.
And in the 50s, especially outside of Freud, the belief was essentially that gay men became gay because their mothers were either too smothering or too cold.
Mm-hmm.
Because obviously there's no winning.
Right. When you're a woman, no winning.
It's like you have to mother in exactly the right way.
Mm-hmm.
Or you've ruined your kid by making them one of those queers.
Of course. I mean, age-old story.
Yeah. And so this whole idea that like men, fathers needed to be present to keep their sons.
But not too present, I
Right.
guess. Mm-hmm.
So Peter is afraid of his father, and his father is Santa, and he's relieved that his father is Santa because when his father is Santa, he can't hurt anyone.
Right. Interesting.
Uh-huh.
So what is Dad doing when he's not Santa,
That's the question. And again, it's a really short little story, but what we know is that Peter is different from other little boys, that his father has obviously been lectured on fathering him differently.
Yeah.
Because the results might be regrettable. And we know that despite this, he and Peter have a pretty fraught relationship. And on top of that, we have Peter's sort of adoring hero worship of all of these workmen.
Right. And they're also all working in the elevator shaft, which is not lost on me that it's a little phallic there. Weird. Okay. Yeah. This is a lot.
Yeah. And so like I don't think it's a stretch, right? To say to interpret this story as being about, as being an essentially coming of age story and a loss of innocence story.
Mm-hmm.
Because by being Santa, his father is rendered safe to him, right? Like Santa is kind of the daddy.
Yeah.
The sweet, loving daddy who pays attention to your sins and knows what you've done, but ultimately is...
He's probably going to get on the nice list at the end of the
day.
Yeah.
Like, we love Santa Daddy.
Mm-hmm.
But Santa Daddy has to die.
Right. I guess. And I feel like, I don't know, I feel like Peter did it in some spooky way. Or, gosh, I just don't know.
Well, and that's the question is like, who killed Santa Daddy? Was it the workmen? Was it the workmen that Peter was obsessed with?
I wonder if it has something to do with like I could see Peter doing it by accident. Like when he closed the gate, that actually like dropped a wrench on his dad's head or something.
Well, but his dad had already fallen by the time he gets to the lift.
Oh.
Because they all hear it. No one knows what it is, but they all hear the sound of his father falling through the elevator shaft.
Oh, completely. Yes.
Well, and I want to be clear. I reread this story about 12 times.
Yeah.
Combing through it for the chronological details of how his father died, because I was like, what the fuck?
Right. Okay, so Dad dies. What does the guy in the restaurant say again once all this happens?
Oh, he says, something's on the floor. Somebody'll be for it, which is weird.
Does that mean Peter will be gay now? I think that's what the diner is saying.
I think,
You know?
I really and genuinely think that this is a story about coming to grips with your own queerness when you're a very small child.
Interesting.
And knowing that it's going to have possibly catastrophic consequences.
Right. Oof, that's deep.
Well, and especially setting it at Christmas, right? I mean, like, whether or not you are a person who actually celebrates the birth of Christ, which I know I am not.
Me neither.
I celebrate a made-up holiday called Nightwell that I half discovered on Twitter as a running bit, and then my friends and I kept going with it.
I think that's great. That's how any traditional holiday is started.
Exactly. So yeah, we celebrate Nightwell.
Yeah.
You know, the Council of Rabbits, the Feasting of the Badgers. It's very like
totally
Red Wall paganism adjacent.
Yeah.
We love it. But it's the winter gathering season, shall we say.
Sure. It's jolly.
It's jolly, and a lot of people take off work and spend obligatory family time.
Yeah, that's another kind of thing. I don't know if that's like, this could be an invention of my own, but you know, in a hotel is kind of like a liminal space. The holiday season is kind of liminal of like, okay, are we really here? Are we really not?
Yeah.
Hot.
So LP Hartley, let's talk about LP Hartley for just a second. So he was gay. He served in World War I, but never saw action. And he was kind of infamously not a very happy man. And he was a middlingly successful writer. Have you ever heard the line, "The past is a foreign country, they do things differently there"?
Yes. Is that him?
Do you know what book that is from?
No.
Nobody does.
Oh.
It is the opening line of his novel, The Go-Between, which was his most successful book. I mean, it is a piece of classic literature. I think we'll probably cover it on the podcast at some point, but like, it's not, at best, he would kind of be considered like a one-hit wonder. And this might partly be because after authors die, a lot of their legacy kind of gets dictated by the myth-making that can be done about them after the fact.
Sure.
And Hartley either destroyed or had someone else destroy all of his papers and all of his letters.
When he died?
When he died.
Oh my.
Probably because he was a gay man.
Yeah, writing gay stuff.
We know he was gay, but he probably had his stuff destroyed because he didn't want anyone knowing
the gay stuff.
Who he'd been, you know.
Right.
So we don't know. Like, we don't know who he was in a relationship with, if anybody. We don't know if he was kind of relatively comfortable with his own sexuality or not. We do know that he joins the admirable list of authors on this podcast that Virginia Woolf was kind of a bitch to for no reason.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's the lesbian way, is to be rude to gay men for no reason.
It's so funny because any author born between 1870 and 1910, somewhere in their biography, it'll just be like, yeah, and then they met Virginia Woolf and she was awful too.
Yeah. That's my girl.
But, you know, he had a complicated life, and it does not seem like he was as self-accepting as some of our other, some of the other authors from the era that we've covered.
Do we know about his family?
Not much. There's really, like, let me just double check. There's not a ton about him. And also sort of matching the didn't read it tradition, there's like one definitive biography of him.
Yeah.
And it's out of print.
Nice.
And I could not track it down in time.
Hey, whatever. I'm going to assume he had a fraught relationship with his father.
I think you're correct. He had a rough go of it. He was not a happy boy.
Yeah.
And so, I don't think you need to be even particularly deft to be like, this story is full of like psychosexual urges and confusion.
Right. Yeah, and like it's interesting that I don't know, something about him stopping to chat with the workers on every floor when we're thinking of the shaft as like a symbol, like that. I don't know what that is there, but it's
It's
interesting. It's
it's
something.
something. It's a thing.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, and so one of the things I find so interesting about this story is we love the daddy dying as Santa thing. We've
Hmm.
got to murder Santa Daddy.
Right.
This is a very popular urban legend,
Mm.
right? I don't know if you've seen the cinematic masterpiece Gremlins.
I haven't actually because I am afraid of it.
Oh, okay. So one of the weirdest and funniest things about the movie Gremlins is
Hmm.
that the teenaged female lead, part of the way through the movie, at the juncture where it's like, this is my dark secret that I'm telling you to
Hmm.
explain why I don't like the holidays.
Right.
The dark secret is that her father, dressed as Santa Claus, tried to come down the chimney, got stuck and died,
Yeah,
and was not discovered for like several days.
totally. Oh,
And this is an urban legend that has been floating around for a long time.
interesting.
This is in the zeitgeist and stays in the zeitgeist. We are kind of obsessed with this daddy dying as Santa thing.
I guess I don't know, it's just like smashing the magic right in front of you, which is pretty jarring, I guess, and interesting to read.
Yeah. Well, and I think there's a lot about it that comes down to the sort of frustrating artificiality of the holidays when you are a child,
Mm, mhm.
especially of that, like, of having an extremely dysfunctional parent, of having a parent with whom your relationship is like really complicated,
Right.
and then going through this sort of time of year and ritual where everyone is just like, this is great.
Ugh, I forgot about that whole part of Christmas until you said that. You're you're right.
And, you think sort of through history, the number of children whose fathers like dressed as Santa once a year, because that was a very common thing until pretty recently. I don't
Mhm.
feel like that's as in vogue anymore as a thing that I think
I don't think so.
more people go to like mall Santas now.
Yeah.
But it used to be like very standard for dad to dress up as Santa every year. So you can see how it's the kind of thing that like a lot of fathers who were pretty shit fathers still dressed as Santa.
Mhm, and the kids can still, like, worship him in that way, like, even though dad is a dick to me every other day, this is the day.
And that tension, right? Like and I think that is a tension that you become extremely familiar with if you are either closeted and your family has a hunch,
Mhm,
or if you're sort of quasi closeted, if your parents know but never, ever, ever, ever want to talk about it.
right. Mhm,
I think that those two tensions are very much in harmony with each other.
yeah, that makes sense. Wow. Yeah,
And so clearly, the only answer is that in order to really become ourselves, we have to murder Santa Daddy.
I would say so. Yeah, I was wondering where that urban legend began of that's the way you grow up. Wow, that's really interesting. And yeah, I don't know. I'm still curious about the domestic squabble. I am wondering, like, I feel like Peter had to have a role in it. Like he did something to make his dad fall, I feel like.
Right.
Even though it already.
Yeah, I mean 100%. Like
Yeah,
maybe the domestic crisis was that Peter was, I don't know, gay.
gay.
And they moved and they had to move.
Yeah.
And, maybe the domestic crisis was a broken hot water heater. We don't know.
Could be. Yeah.
There's a lot happening.
Yeah. It's also interesting that it's an elevator. Just that in and of itself is pretty interesting. That it's like an elevator is like a new thing. They did the chimney back then, but now they do the elevator. But it's an old elevator, even to them. So that's surely symbolic of something that people smarter than me could put together.
Tradition.
Yeah.
Art Deco. The Gilded Age.
Exactly.
They didn't have elevators in the Gilded Age. Well, when did... Wait, no, not yet.
You could tell me any year that elevators were invented, and I'd say, yeah, for sure, that makes sense.
But yeah, I mean, what are your thoughts? Any other thoughts?
I didn't expect to be thinking about it. I didn't expect there to be so much there, I guess. I was like, surely something creepy is going to happen with the elevator and probably something bloody or ghosty. But wow, it's a whole thing. It's a whole thing that you could think about for the rest of the night, which is what I'm surely going to do. Very interesting. And this was not for children?
No. This was published in a collection of ghost stories in 1955.
That's interesting too.
And I think sort of one of the last things that I will say is like, this story to me feels very much of the moment in the 50s where, so at the very beginning, right, when I was like, remember, think of Dad as someone who either served in World War II
right,
or is super fucking weird because he didn't serve in World War II.
Yeah.
The 50s was another one of those eras where everyone was like, the men are in crisis.
Right. Who's here for the men?
Because the secret is, if you read enough literature, the men are always in crisis. The men are never not in crisis.
But God forbid a woman be the president. Jeez, she'll have her period everywhere.
She'll bleed on everything, and she won't be able to murder Daddy Santa correctly.
Exactly.
But I think this whole thing with like Santa, the complicated Santa daddy paired with the sort of 50s masculinity crisis, the idea that men were being neutered by this modern age of office jobs and having to, be polite to other men.
Use soap. Yeah.
It's all tied together, right? Daddy and Santa and manly men, but manly men who need to be fathers in the correct way so their sons don't come out gay. It's a sort of imagery and symbolism cocktail that we can't seem to leave alone.
You're right. That's pretty interesting. Oh, wow. I don't know. I wonder if we'll ever uncover.
I don't know.
If we'll ever crack the man open,
Well, and I mean, there's the Gremlins urban legend and like even like the Bad Santa movies.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Or even like I Saw Mommy Kissing Santa Claus. Like that's still like a disruption of this idea of like Santa is pure and magic. Well, here he's wrecking your family, he's kissing your mom,
Yeah.
Interesting.
I feel like when you are a child, you want so badly for your daddy to be Santa Claus. And when you are an adult, I think there is a sort of mirror urge to turn Santa into your actual father.
Right.
Who failed you.
Yeah. I can see that. Yeah, I could see that. I could also see looking back on Santa in a more idealized way, I guess, of like, oh no, my childhood was awesome. Yeah. And you know what I mean? Of like removing it in that way.
Yeah.
Separating yourself from it.
Yeah.
This made me think a lot more than I thought it would. I'll say it.
So, at a minimum, we've figured out the steps for the gay awakening.
Absolutely.
Step 1, This is the gay agenda. Move into a hotel.
That's always step one.
Yeah. Befriend a team of workmen
Mm-hmm.
and murder Daddy Santa.
And make sure there's a shaft, a big one.
And make sure that there's a big gilded shaft.
Yeah. With a cage,
Yeah.
ideally. Wow. Cool. This was really cool.
Well, yeah, thanks.
Yeah.
Any closing thoughts before we wrap up the actual show part of the show?
What's the name of the story again? I gotta Google it and go on Reddit and all this stuff now.
Someone in the lift.
Someone in the lift. I think that's my final thought. I didn't know it'd be gay, but I'm pleased that it was. Yeah.
This is not officially a gay literature podcast, but it is a gay literature podcast.
Let's make it official. We can gild it.
You know what? You're right.
Huge. Congratulations.
Happy holidays. Thank you.
Happy holidays.
Any exciting holiday plans for you? Any holiday messages for our listeners?
I'd say, make sure that you have written your Christmas lists due to the supply chain things that are persistent even today. Santa's affected by those as well. I would also say that if you get coal in your stocking, don't take it personally.
That's fair. It just means you're straight.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like, you have everything else. So just let me have the stocking in that way,
There we go. All
Yeah.
right. Well, thank you again for joining us. This was fun.
Thank you for having me. I thought it was fun too. I hope the listeners thought it was fun as well. Wink, wink.
I'm sure they will. And thank all of you for joining us and for finding us hilarious and enjoying this very strange holiday story. This episode will kick off. Next week, we are going to do another complicated Christmas story because I feel like, if you want straightforward Christmas cheer, you can turn on literally any TV channel or radio station.
Mm-hmm.
I am going to bring you all something for those of us who have slightly more complicated feelings this time of year.
I can't wait to listen to that one too.
And then for the Sundays before Christmas and before New Year's Eve, just like last year, I will be posting the Holiday Horror Theater, where I will just be reading you a wintry or Christmassy ghost story, maybe with a little bit of commentary afterwards, but it will just be me on my own to give my wonderful guests a break. So that's what we have coming up. And until then, as always, if you can, this week, this month, this pay period, consider supporting a living author because they could really use the love. Bye.
Bye.
Didn't Read It was created, written, researched, and recorded by me, Grace Todd. Maddie Wood is our co-producer and social media maven. Editing by Tally, a true podcasting professional, and Grace Todd. Our theme song is Books 2.0, written, performed, and recorded by William Albritton. Special thanks to Black Iris Social Club in Richmond, Virginia. Reach out to us with questions, concerns, or academic scrutiny at didntreaditpod@gmail.com.